Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana says that government needs to take the impending greylisting of South Africa's economy seriously. The Financial Action Task Force recently announced there are loopholes in the country's financial system that allowed for money laundering, terrorist financing and other financial crimes to occur. He was answering oral questions from MPs during a plenary debate in Parliament. Government is in the process of amending some bills to convince the global market that it is capable of fighting money laundering and terrorism. Godongwana said that the threat of greylisting should not be undermined. The Financial Action Task Force gave South Africa until October to prove that it has a credible plan to address deficiencies. Failing to provide such would result in the country being greylisted in February next year, making business even harder to conduct. Dr. Iraj Abedian is the Chief Economist at Pan-African Investment and Research Services, and he joins us now for more. Thank you so much for joining us. Always good to talk to you. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Peter, for inviting me, and greetings to our viewers. Thank you.
All right. Explain to us what greylisting is. For some of us, we think that's when your phone has been stolen and you tell your service provider to switch it off.
Look, greylisting in the financial terms, or more accurately in the global financial terms, begins to reflect the level of regulations and the effectiveness of regulatory bodies and law enforcement agencies in a country. When you have a country that has good laws but is not implemented, it's got a police force that doesn't really effectively take care of the criminality, especially financial crime that can have many, many dimensions. It can have extortion to financing of terrorism. It begins to become a problem for the investors. Remember, investors that we need from wherever they are. There could be pension funds of the teachers in New York or in Moscow or wherever they are. They have to trust that when their hard-earned pensions are managed by the fund managers invested in a particular jurisdiction, it doesn't end up being abused. A good example of it in South Africa, Marcus Jooste squandered billions, tens of billions of pensioners locally, internationally, and he still walks around as if he owns a Stellenbosch. So the issue is why? Who is sleeping in the job? Our NPA is a shadow of what it used to be. So even when they have a lot of evidence, they cannot close the case and put prisoners or put criminals in prison or bring people into account. A lot of companies are engaging in all kinds of illicit financial flows. So when a jurisdiction doesn't have what it takes to take care of people's financial commitments, especially foreign financial direct investments, then it gets greylisted. It means, watch, this country is not safe, this financial system has got many loopholes, the government is not doing what the government should be doing. Either they don't know, or if they don't know, they don't know how to do it. And so essentially greylisting puts a question mark around the safety of foreign investment in a particular country.
So which authority is responsible for making sure that we have a sound financial system that's greylisting proof?
Look, ultimately, the buck stops at the cabinet. It's a government, and within that, National Treasury and Minister of Finance, they have responsibility in many areas. Of course, that's on the regulatory side, on the effectiveness of the regulatory bodies. That falls under their jurisdiction to have the right laws on the books. That is the necessary condition. The sufficient condition is that when you have good laws and good regulatory agencies, then you need to have law enforcement agencies that are competent and effective and active. And you can have good legislation, but if the NPA or whoever is in charge of bringing the criminals into account doesn't act and does not act effectively, it takes years and years and decades to do anything, then people's investment is at risk. So the question that you raise is not a simple agency. It also includes the Reserve Bank monitoring some of the internal and international flows. But these are the agencies that collectively need to make sure that the regulation is up to date, effective, but also law enforcement agencies, including NPA, including the regulatory bodies that regulates auditors, regulatory body that regulates the chartered accountants, directors of companies, and so on and so forth.
I'm just trying to understand, because I always thought that we have a fairly sophisticated financial system, especially when we compare to perhaps other states on the continent. How is it that things have been allowed to get to a point where we are threatened with greylisting? Is it negligence? Is it incompetence? Or is it purposeful, wanton desire not to close those loopholes?
Peter, the truth to be told, all of the above. We had 10 years of a government from the heart of the cabinet purposefully hollowing out institutions of law enforcement, hollowing out capacity and competence, honesty and ethicality in these institutions, expunging capacity, replacing them with incompetence and corrupt. And if an example of it, the ex-commissioner of police and his deputy were arrested. That's really how bad it got. We had an NPA that was hollowed out politically intentionally. So we had about 10 years, 12 years of intentional political machination to destroy these institutions of law enforcement and effective regulation. Beyond that, we then have a succession of leaders who are good at talking, good at writing speeches and reading speeches, but after they've read their speeches, they forget what they've read and what they should do. For example, the Minister of Finance has known for 11 months, if not longer, that if we don't do certain things, greylisting is where we're heading. The president has known, the cabinet has known, the National Treasury has talked about, but nobody does anything. So there is a mixture, a lethal, a very unfortunate cocktail of intentional destroying of these institutions, as well as crime by omission, not by commission, omitting to do what they are paid to do. I'm at pain to understand how can a president or a minister read the correct thing, think and share with the nation the right thing, but then go to sleep and as if there is no follow-up, there is no timeline, there is no things to be done to protect the integrity of our financial system. Yes, we had a very world-class financial system, and in many ways, the private sector part of it is functionally world competitive. But from a regulatory point of view, through a well-oiled machine, a lot of illicit financial flows leave the country and leaves the investors in the lurch.
Given the scale of the deficiencies, is there enough time to fix it? I know government is busy trying to fast-track some reforms, but are we going to get greylisted? Do we have enough time to get out of this?
We could avoid it, Peter, I believe, if we change gear, really substantially. At the moment, we are in reverse gear. We need to get within, like a good Ferrari, within the next 10 seconds to 200 kilometers per hour, stay focused, stay like a racing driver. Can we do it? Yeah, the president could call the cabinet, get the legal team, legislate what needs to be done, make a commitment, get the parliament to sit down for 3, 4, 5 days, however long, bring the experts in, do what it needs to be done, but not write a speech, make a promise and go to sleep. That won't work. It's not all about talk. It should be about actions. At the same time, we need to be allowing the law enforcement agencies to arrest the criminals, to put them in prison, whether they're politically high or low, whether corporate-wise, they are rich or poor. When you are a criminal, you got to account for it. That's what the global financial markets, the investors need to see. A blend of do the right legislation, upgrade your legislation, but also don't dilly-dally. People are criminals, arrest them, bring them to account, recover the stolen funds, and make sure that the law means the law, not just a piece of paper expressed or read like a piece of poetry.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the consequences of greylisting. What will that mean for business and also ordinary citizens who perhaps are listening to this and they're thinking that this isn't really something for them?
It is absolutely everything to do with them, with you and I, and particularly the working class. The bottom line, and I'm going to go from bottom line and answer the question to the best of my ability, and from the hardest that affects everybody. Greylisting would shave off, if other countries like Pakistan, Mauritius, and others are examples to go by, will shave off up to 1% of our GDP. Peter, just imagine the implications of that for job creation in a society that's already got a phenomenally chronic and widespread unemployment and poverty. It will make investment in the country a lot more cumbersome, a lot more costly. Foreign investors, both long-term, or if you like, foreign direct investment, as well as inflow investment, short-term investments, all of those will be subject to additional audit process, additional compliance, additional know your customer, and it goes on and on and on. And who would want to go through all that trouble? But the bottom line is, the day that we get greylisted, a year later, our national investment level will be up to 8 to 9, possibly 10% below what it was the year before, bearing in mind that the year before it wasn't sufficient. That's why we are in a sort of technical recession. So the implications are huge. For our banking sector, for our fund managers, will not be as before as freely accessing pension funds globally. And the list goes on and on. So every citizen will be affected. Every company that needs capital to do business, new business or expand businesses will be affected. And in a country like ours, where we are short of savings, we are dependent on foreign investors, in other words, other people's savings in other countries in order to keep our economy going, because we don't have sufficient savings, because we have so much poverty and unemployment. It is really bad news at the time that we can least afford it.
Dr. Iraj Abedian, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank
you. That's Dr. Iraj Abedian is the Chief Economist at Pan-African Investment and Research Services, talking to us about this potential greylisting. And it looks as if an enormous amount of work is required to be done to avoid what could be catastrophic for an already distressed economy. Dr. Abedian saying that it could shave off as much as 1% of our GDP if we get greylisted.